We're almost a month into the season, and the Snakes are looking solid at 3 wins above 500. Is it too good to be true? Should Brandon Pfaadt have gone to AAA instead of the bullpen? And with some of their best players returning from injury, and some outsiders looking like potential MVP candidates, are the D-backs already set for a solid postseason run? We're answering all those questions and more right now on the T-Backs podcast.
Baseball is back.
Perdomo makes the play.
And a high fly ball. No doubt about this. Home run Marte.
They're going to send the ball all the way around. Corbin Carroll with an inside the park answer back.
It's Alec Thomas from the Diamondbacks.
Former Major League Baseball player Luis Gonzalez.
I'm Tori Lavello, and you're listening to the T-Backs Podcast.
T-Backs Podcast.
T-Backs Podcast.
Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the T-Backs podcast, where we bring you all the hottest Arizona Diamondbacks tea and talk from across the pond here in London. We are, as always, proud to be Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast. And with series victory over the Mets, Phillies and Orioles, we are now looking at a Diamondbacks team that hasn't lost a series since the opening series against the Evil Empire over in LA. The question is, how have we managed to be so good with so many players on the injured list, so many players who, maybe we didn't think would be huge contributors at the start of the season, all on the opening day roster? Apparently, they're now MVP candidates, and we're going to get really stuck into how on earth we've managed to be so good at a stage that, no one was really expecting. We're going to break down some of what makes this seemingly average team capable of putting up such a push despite an ever-extending injury list, and answer some of the burning questions in the fan base who are keen to know how a team with a few slumping veterans and, a bullpen that induces anxiety attacks in the past can possibly have won the most games in the National League since March 30th with 11, and have posted a 6-3 record on a road trip many are calling part of the hardest opening schedule in baseball. Let's get right into it. Let's start with an often discussed area for the Diamondbacks fans, which is an incredible switch hitter at second base, capable of hitting for contact and power, and whose above-average defense has set consecutive hit records like nobody's business. Now, I'll forgive you for thinking we're talking about Ketel Marte, but no, this is also a description of Ildemaro Vargas. And for the second time in a row, we're going to talk about him. He's always been considered, dependable enough as a utility infield option. And yeah, even as an emergency outfielder at times. But with his homer on Tuesday and a bunt single the day after, on a 3-1 count, that was in the finale, which you don't see very often either, it's against Baltimore, Vargas has now set a franchise record with 12 consecutive games with a hit to start the season, which puts him in front of names like David Peralta in 2019, Didi Gregorius in 2013, Steve Finley's year 2000, who, they all have 10. That's pretty illustrious company, and you've got to tip your hat. Like Ildemaro Vargas, yeah, we all know he's, the all-time best Reno ace or whatever it is that people like to call him, but at the same time, he is rewarding our faith in him with loyalty, and he's putting up numbers that, this guy's now a serious contender compared to Ketel Marte in that second base spot. If Marte's, DHing, why isn't Vargas the second baseman? That just makes the most sense. It's pretty cool when you consider that this has gone through a stretch where we've been a little panicky about some injury scares to Ketel, and it's nothing short of applause-worthy the job that Vargas has managed to do on this road trip. And that's pretty cool. We are now also 2 for 2 on repeat topics from last week's podcast, as we've also again got to talk about Paul Sewald, who at the time of writing leads baseball with 6 saves on the year. So far in the season, he's got 7.1 innings pitched. He's only given up 4 hits and 2 earned runs. No bases on balls, 10 Ks, and he has a 2.43 ERA. Now, one of the things that stresses us Diamondbacks fans out about Paul Sewald is obviously that propensity to throw in the low 90s, high 80s meatball for a home run. And I won't lie, there's still some of those in his arsenal, but he's been sequencing well. He's worked well with all 3 catchers he's been paired with. Hasn't really shown too many wobbles, regardless of if it's Gabby Moreno, James McCann, or Adrian Del Castillo behind the plate. And I think that a stat that's gone a little unnoticed in that line, with everybody's attentions on the usual saves versus opportunities, is that those 0 walk allowed, which speaks to the kind of attitude and confidence we have in the bullpen at the moment. On the other side, one guy who might not be feeling so hot out of the pen, that's Brandon Pfaadt, who through no real fault of his own has been moved from the rotation to the bullpen. Mostly that's just been because of how lights out Mike Soroka has been. So the first, cheers to you, sip of tea of the week, that goes to Mike Soroka again. That actually really hits. That's good tea. Now, like most of us, and the most vocal guy I've seen on social about this is Dalton Feely, I'm kind of shocked that Brandon wasn't optioned to AAA to continue to work and develop. You'd kind of have to imagine that despite how talented we all know Brandon is as a starter, Torrey thinks that he's got more value to the team right now, bringing him in out of the bullpen. Which, I'm kind of hoping doesn't come back to bite us in the backside by hurting Brandon's development as a rotation piece for the future. As for, how we should go about using him out of the pen now, he's there as probably the long relief option. That's not a surprise. But statistically, it points that he'll probably be given the rock at the start of an inning instead of midway through, because in his career, Brandon's allowed 375 average and a 983 OPS when runners are on base versus just 190 average and 673 OPS when the bases are empty. But he's also got a similar kind of inconsistency past the second time in the order through that we saw from Slade Ciccone when he was here. And obviously Slade was part of the trade for Josh Naylor to the Guardians. And that's, the tendency to blow up a bit later in appearances. Like Pfaadt has had his appearances, don't get me wrong, like I know you're all going to point out the yes hitter where he blew up and didn't make it out of the first inning and a start. But Pfaadt's allowed a 1209 OPS when going through the lineup the second time in a game this season. And that is the highest amongst qualified starting pitchers in MLB. And if that's not bad enough, since 2023, Brandon owns the worst ERA in MLB among pitchers with at least 80 starts. Now, that's not good. But I refuse to believe that the guy we saw pitch to incredible numbers with incredible amounts of confidence in the 2023 playoff run is, that I'd refuse to believe that was just a fluke. There's clearly a decent pitcher in there somewhere. We've just not really seen them too much recently, but there is hope. The move to the pen from the rotation last year for Ryan Nelson was very much instrumental in recommitting him to developing some fundamentals of his game and just working on the basics first before, getting in his head, overcommitting, trying to do too much with the baseball. And now that's seemingly what's unlocked the solid and dependable pitcher we now know Ryan Nelson to be. So I personally think that sending Brandon to Reno would have been the right move, just, in case of, a pitcher injury crisis. It would be good to keep a guy who's been part of our rotation for the last 3 years stretched out as a starter. But, it's always good to have that insurance policy. But again, I'm not the D-backs front office. I won't argue too much. I'm happy to express an opinion. But as long as Merrill Kelly comes back from injury, that looking like his usual self, then yeah, I think this makes the most sense right now, because you can't move Soroka out the rotation given how good he's been. And again, like I said last week, we shouldn't judge a player, and especially a starting pitcher, on one game. So yeah, patience. That's a fantastic segue into our next topic. Let's talk Jorge Barrosa, and more specifically, Jorge Barrosa extra base hits. Now, Jorge Barrosa, as we all know, bit of a mixed bag in his D-backs career so far. Negative .7 WAR last year and a pretty cold bat as well. But not on this road trip. And I think it's fair to say, and I'm going to claim some credit for here, first spring training game I went to this year while I was back over in Arizona, Jorge Barrosa hits a home run. And I was like, yeah, Jorge Barrosa can have a good year. So clearly I know ball. Clearly I know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to claim some of the credit for that. Thank you, guys. You're welcome. Barrosa Barrels, though, later has chalked up 7 extra base hits in 12 games this year and holds a positive WAR for the first time in his major league career, batting .244, which, is not, Barry Bonds numbers, but it speaks to the strength in the group depth mentality this team is starting to be known for. I talked about, the next man up mentality last week. More interestingly, I'd argue that perhaps the lack of incredible standout players at the moment and a sense of that true closeness and competition for players and positions is really what's motivating the team right now. With a stalwart outfield presence of Lourdes Gurriel Jr. returning from injury just as Jordan Lawler goes on the IL, there's not always going to be too much room for a player that, we can't wait around for them. If they're not contributing to the team, we can't give them the time to heat back up again. If there's going to be somebody who's apparently going to make an instant impact coming up from injury or from Reno, then yeah, they have to do that. And clearly Jorge knows that, because he's taking his chance and is currently the only player in the MLB this season with at least 7 extra base hits in 10 or fewer total hits on the year, which, when you actually think about it, is a pretty crazy stat. Like, the only thing that really comes to mind with that is like that Babe Ruth quote where you either strike out swinging wild or hit a home run. Well, Jorge either grounds out weakly to short or makes solid contact and then turns off the Jets, and there is no middle ground with him. And that's pretty good for him when you consider that right on the hot of his heels, there's a guy like Ryan Waldschmidt breathing down your neck in Reno, and he really is posting crazy numbers. Like, for example, right now, a 3.11 average, 417, 557 slug, 437 WOBA, and 146 WRC plus, which is pretty wild. Next man up grasping an opportunity as well, since we're talking about that, let's talk Adrian Del Castillo, who has also managed to put together an untidy little hit streak for himself, but not as impressive as Ildemaro, but still pretty good. He has managed to hit in 7 straight with a 2-run triple and a clutch 420-foot 2 RBI bomb in the 10th in the series finale versus Baltimore. But who am I kidding? We all know about ADC's power as his bat, but his work behind the plate has looked better this year. He's, like we talked about multiple times at the start of the season, a good option for the DH platoon, and that surprises nobody. But the competition from just how impressive of a veteran presence James McCann has been in the last few games, he's 5 for his last 9, hitting .555 with 7 total bases, 2 extra base hits, 3 RBI, and an average exit velocity of 94.6, which, if he were qualified, would lead the team. That's provided really good competition and experience behind the plate and at the plate, which has clearly spurred on ADC to, make an impact. And that experience in the Catchers Union hopefully is rubbing off something worth learning for ADC too, because James McCann isn't going to be around forever. Gabby Moreno apparently has elbows and knees made of glass, so ADC might have to see a lot more action than maybe we thought he might behind the plate. And Aramis Garcia's just had to come up from Reno as well, so yeah, looking pretty good. And on that topic of experience, and wow, I'm really on fire with these transitions today, right? There's finally some signs of Nolan Arenado breaking out of his slump as he went with a 2-homer, 5 RBI night in the second game in Baltimore. And day 3 brought in a clutch extra RBI in the 10th. And for those of you who are going down the pub for trivia night, which is a thing we do here in the UK, and I'm sure there's bar trivia in the US as an equivalent. That's got to be a thing, right? Here's a great stat for the last game, if you want to really nerd out and impress your friends. Nolan Arenado collected his 1,934th career hit in that game, passing Hall of Famer Andrew Jones and moving into tie with Bobby Lowe, Bing Miller, and Devon White for 328th on the all-time hit list. Now, that's a pretty good stat, but I'm also not claiming that Arenado is back to his very best, because that's a very high bar to reach. But following what was undoubtedly the worst season of his career in 2025, it's pretty good that we've got some encouraging signs showing up. I was almost going to title this episode something like Nolan Arenado or Arenado No or something like that. And I was going to spend most of it talking about, why he's in so much of a slump in the past week. But since we seem to be on a roll, I won't try and, pile on the brain. I won't try and jinx it either way. Let's just, keep the positive vibes going. Baseball fans are nothing if not superstitious, right? But before we talk some big picture stuff, I also would love to highlight the inning of work that came to lock down the save in that finale against Baltimore, and that was delivered by a really impressive effort from Juan Murillo. Now, he threw 28 pitches the day before and nearly blew the game, but he threw a 1-2-3 10th inning without even allowing the ghost runner to score, and that's quite a statement to make to your manager. And I'm glad to see it working out for Juan in a bullpen that has a lot of righties performing above average right now. Like, we don't have any lefties, so being, somebody who throws, decent velocity right-handed, but isn't like, it has incredible put-away stuff, you're going to have to do pretty well in order to make an impact in that bullpen. But, Juan Murillo pulled it off. Now, we've given everybody their kudos. Let's answer the big question. What does this hot streak mean? Is it a sign of big things to come and a solid playoff push, or is this just, the nature of baseball with things going up and down at different points throughout the season? Well, I think it's a bit of both. Like, baseball is a sport where, teams can put together some incredible streaks and still miss out on the playoffs, or teams can put it all together at the right times, just at the last minute, like the 2023 Diamondbacks, and sneak a wild card spot and then just go and shock everybody because no one expected for them to be there and they've got nothing to lose, right? But as Ben over at the AZ Snake Pit has pointed out, this was a rough and tumble road trip, and I'd add, part of our toughest on-paper stretch of games all year. We're back at Chase Field tomorrow on GMT time. That's going to be this afternoon for you guys over in the USA, but it's 1 a.m. in the morning for me coming up with the game later today to take on the Blue Jays. And then we're following that with what most bookies will have as an easy and relaxed series win against the Chicago White Sox. Now, I'm not going to go out and say, oh yeah, we can go and sweep the Sox and just completely disrespect them because, Munetaka Murakami has been on an absolute tear for them recently, and, this is the Diamondbacks. We're always capable of a blow-up. But we've definitely got good reason to be, pretty confident in the immediate future. Longer term, considering, the level of talent, experience, and overall hype that's coming back off the IL as the season progresses, like Lourdes Gurriel Jr. has already begun their rehab assignment in Reno as we speak, and most people are projecting him to come up during the Toronto series. Corbin Burns returning to rotation pretty soon. Then AJ Puck and Justin Martinez hot on the heel to give the bullpen even more impressive stuff. That's 4 significant upgrades we have arriving to the team around the All-Star break or sooner. And, a few of us podcasters in the Diamondback space have said, yeah, the plan needs to be Torey Lovullo and co. Just keep your heads above ground, keep treading water, stay, as close to 500 as we can until everybody's back and fit and healthy and yada yada, All-Star break, yada yada this, yada yada, trade deadline that. But we're exceeding those expectations right now. Let the returning stars swing things in our favor, and let's go make waves. We seem to be able to do a lot more than just hold our own and play respectable baseball and just be a league average team. We are capable of more than that, and we are showing this. Yes, I think if we are going to look at this team in the mindset of, okay, well, what if we make the playoffs? Then what happens? This isn't a team that I believe is going to go and dominate LA on the road, and we tried that and we came pretty close to winning the series in LA, but that was with a fully fit rotation last time when we did it in the championship series before in 2023, and that was on paper probably a better team than this. You had Christian Walker at first base, Evan Longoria at third. And I think if you look at that versus how Carlos Santana and Nolan Arenado are playing right now, that is not an equivalent team. But then you have to consider factors like, Fernandez. Where has he come from? He was in Double-A last year. He, went and worked out and got absolutely jacked over the offseason, came back and absolutely mashed in spring, and he can play every position on the infield. It would be a blow if we were to lose Ketel Marte or Geraldo Perdomo, or indeed actually still Nolan Arenado, because he's still a good baseball player, and Jose had to fill in there for the rest of the season. But whether or not he would put up the kind of numbers that a postseason first baseman, a postseason guy at the hot corner, postseason shortstop would have to do, I don't really know. There's not really a way of replacing Geraldo Perdomo in terms of the mold of what he brings to this team. He's both experienced, despite the fact he's still comparatively fairly young. He walks as often as he hits, but he hits well. He's a switch hitter, hits the power. Jose has some of those factors, but I don't think we can count on him to do that day in, day out yet. But I think he needs to be in the lineup every day, given how good he's been. Is that a playoff guy in his rookie season? Who knows? Corbin Carroll won Rookie of the Year 2023 in part of that playoff push. So, anything's kind of possible. But I think we all agree Jose Fernandez and Corbin Carroll currently on a bit of a different level. But who knows? I'm more than happy to see it, and I'll take a big deep swig of my tea, and I'll just keep doing that, and I'll wait for the Diamondbacks to prove me wrong, so then you can all see me do absolutely spit my tea out and make a mess everywhere over here live on camera, because that would be funny. Then you have to look around the depth in other positions as well. Adrian Del Castillo, good backup catcher to Gabby Moreno. James McCann making a case to be the first choice catcher right now, same thing. Outfield, again, there's plenty of guys like Ryan Waldschmidt's probably the next man up if something were to go down in the outfield. Alec Thomas is not having a great year, but is still, putting up the defense we all know he can do. So I don't see why we would sacrifice him right now, given that we already sacrificed Jake McCarthy in the name of keeping Alec Thomas in center field. But then behind them, AJ Vukovic had a pretty impressive spring. We all know he's fairly well suited to Reno. He does pretty well. And then behind him, Great Britain's Christian Robinson. Yeah, same thing. Can play all three outfield spots. Played, left, played center, played right last year. Again, anything is kind of possible with those guys. Like, they could break out and immediately be incredible at the MLB level, or they could come up and, kind of like Jordan Lawler when he first came up, looked like a little bit of a fish out of water. Then you get into, can, somebody like Tommy Troy go in the outfield? He's probably, been bumped a little down the pecking order given how good Jose Fernandez has been. Like, Tommy was probably in consider for like third or second base. And then what? Like, James Groover. Can he go there? Lucan Baker has already, been called up from Reno to play first base, which says a lot about how we might feel about, somebody like Ivan Melendez, for example, given that Pavin Smith is out and Carlos Santana is in a bit of a slump and has injured himself, like I said last week, watching a fastball go by. Don't know how you've managed that. The depth is there, but the depth, whether or not they can deliver, like, even league average numbers, let alone, like, playoff contender numbers, that's something that very few people can predict. I know there'll be guys that are inside the Diamondbacks organization that know these players better, that watch them day in, day out, that know which ones are probably ready to make that step up and which ones aren't. But then again, there's also that mental thing of, like, you can feel like you're prepared, you can feel confident in yourself, and still, come up to the major leagues and suck. I think that's happened for, probably about half of all prospects, if not more than that, make their major league debut. Sometimes you're going to struggle. Even if you, rookie of the year level candidate, you're going to inevitably suffer that sophomore slump. Like Connor Griffin over in Pittsburgh, for example, came up, did incredibly, and then went on a thing of like 0 for 15 after that. Like, this is a guy that everyone's excited about, and at the same time, even if I'm going to talk about somebody from up the road in Los Angeles, like Dalton Rushing, didn't immediately look like an MLB level player, but they needed him to be because of, I think it was an injury to Will Smith. And he eventually got it sorted out, and now he plays, I'm pretty sure he plays the majority of games over there in LA. So whether or not we can think, Tommy Troy, Ryan Waldschmidt, despite how good they are at AA, AAA, how good of a spring they had, the right decisions were made to not bring those guys up too soon. I agree with that. Whether or not they can come up and be as good as Jose has been when he made his debut, who knows? If you are Tommy Troy or Ryan Waldschmidt watching this podcast, which I very much doubt, but I'd love to hear. Or if you have, their mum, their dad, their best friend, whatever, their brother, get in the comments. Tell me, Ryan Waldschmidt, by the way, he hits like 104 miles an hour fastballs off the pitching machine or whatever, and he's definitely ready to play in the Major League Baseball. Yeah, I'd love to know that, because that, one, gives me reason to be, unreasonably hyped. We're only a month into the season, if that, and I'm already asking questions on the podcast of what are we going to do in the postseason? Yeah, of course, that's incredibly premature. But it's also fun to talk about, and that's, I think, the thing that, I like to do most on this show is talk about unreasonable expectations, get, far too excited, far too early, just because I love this team, and I would love to see this team get the attention and, hype that it deserves from, the national, and in my case, international baseball media. Like, international baseball over here, like, there's a huge Phillies fan base in the UK, there's Dodgers and Giants fans, and I'm just like, yeah, let's go Diamondbacks. But also, there's more of us coming. Like, that, there's 3 big, like, British Diamondbacks accounts on social media. But I've had guys on the Diamondbacks Reddit this week being like, I'm a new baseball fan from the UK, and I'm trying to pick a team. Well, why should I pick the Diamondbacks? That's awesome that people are even considering us, because whenever I go and talk to my baseball friends at work, and this is in my day job, by the way, I don't just sit here and talk about baseball all day, every day. I say, hey, I'm a Diamondbacks fan. Some of them, despite the fact they know baseball and are fans of, Red Sox, Yankees, Phillies, some of them don't actually know the Diamondbacks still, just because they're not worth people paying attention to. Well, I think if this team keeps up the form that it is in, a lot more people are going to pay attention, and that is where we're going to wrap up this episode this week. As always, I want to say thank you very much for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, blah, 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 thumbs up. All of those things, so you never miss an episode. We are always grateful for your continued viewership and support. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next.